The thing you need to understand about Ellerby Yard is that it's small. I don't mean small the way some people mean it when they're being modest about something that's actually impressive. I mean 32 tracks. I mean a flat switching operation with 2 goats, that's what we call the switcher locomotives, and a crew of 11 people spread across 3 shifts. The kind of yard where a Class I railroad shoves off the cars it doesn't want to deal with and lets the short line figure out the last mile. Fertilizer for the co-op in Richland. Lumber to the mill in Seneca. Corn syrup in tank cars that sit for weeks because nobody at the plant in Delphos picks up the phone on Fridays. Ellerby is about 9 miles east of Lima, Ohio, in a part of the state where the land is so flat you can watch your dog run away for 3 days. The yard sits in a shallow cut between a soybean field and a stretch of County Road 15 that sees maybe 40 cars a day, most of them pickups. The nearest actual town is Ellerby itself, a post office, a Family Dollar, a bar called Klingler's that smells like decades of spilled bush light, and about 1,100 people who've made a kind of peace with the fact that the 21st century arrived everywhere else first. I'm Jolene Mackey. People call me Joe. I've worked the night shift at Ellerby Yard for 6 years. I'm a car checker, which means I walk the tracks with a flashlight and a clipboard, verifying that what's physically sitting on the rail matches what the computer says should be sitting on the rail. I read the reporting marks on the sides of the cars, those letter and number combinations, like BNSF 726841 or CSXT 503297. And I check them against the consist, which is the official list of every car in a train's lineup. I check the AEI tags, the little transponder plates bolted to the side frames. I look at the mechanical condition of the running gear. I note any bad orders, cars with broken parts, stuck brakes, anything that needs repair before it moves again. It is not glamorous work. It is walking, in the dark, in whatever weather Ohio decides to throw at you, between steel walls that are taller than you are, carrying a light that makes the shadows jump. It's the kind of job where you develop a feel for the yard the way a farmer develops a feel for soil. You learn which tracks drain well and which ones turn to soup in April. You learn the sound a coupler makes when it's not fully engaged versus when it's seated right. You learn to read the darkness. After 6 years, I could walk Ellerby with my eyes closed and tell you what track I was on by the grade of the ballast under my boots. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand. I know this yard. I know every track, every siding, every rusted out bumping post. I know which light poles work and which ones the railroad has been planning to replace since before I was hired. When something is wrong at Ellerby, I notice. Not because I'm looking for trouble, because the wrongness interrupts a pattern I carry in my body. And something was wrong for almost 4 months before I understood what it was. The first time it happened was a Wednesday night in January. I remember because Wednesdays were when we got the Conrail Shared Assets Manifest off the Toledo subdivision, usually around 2 a.m., and it was the busiest part of my shift. I'd walk the inbound, check the cars, radio the list to Denise in the yard office, and she'd reconcile it against the electronic consist that came over from dispatch. That particular Wednesday, I walked the train and counted 47 cars. The consist said 47 cars. Every reporting mark matched. Every AEI tag pinged the reader clean. I radioed it in, went to pour myself coffee in the shanty, and by the time I came back 20 minutes later to check whether the goat had started sorting, there were 48 cars on track 12. I stood there and counted twice. 48. Now, look, this is not a ghost story. Cars get added to trains at intermediate stops. A consist can be wrong if someone upstream didn't update the paperwork. In a bigger yard with a hump operation and computer-controlled retarders, a discrepancy like that would trigger an automatic flag. At Ellerby, the flag is me, standing in the cold, squinting at a boxcar that shouldn't be there, and writing down its reporting mark by hand. The extra car was a plain 50-foot boxcar, reporting mark A-Box 52114. A-Box is Railbox, a pool car, meaning it's not owned by any particular railroad. It circulates. Could belong to anybody's load. It was sitting at the end of the cut on track 12, coupled up like it had always been there. I radioed Denise. "I've got a 48th car on 12, A-Box, 52114. It's not on the consist." "Huh," she said. "Let me check." Denise was good at her job. Had been doing it longer than I had. She came back 2 minutes later. Nothing in the system. No waybill, no assignment, no origin. The AEI reader logged 47 cars at the gate. "You sure about the count?" I was sure. "Write it up," she said. "I'll flag it for day shift." So I wrote it up. And the next morning, when I came back for my shift, I checked the log. The day shift yardmaster, a guy named Rick Anglin, who'd been running Ellerby since the Clinton administration, had noted, A-Box 52114, no record found, car empty on inspection, moved to storage track 27, pending inquiry. That was it. No follow-up, no inquiry. The car sat on track 27 for 2 weeks, and then one morning it was gone. No record of it being picked up, no switch list showing it being pulled. The AEI reader at the gate didn't log it leaving. It just wasn't there anymore. I might have forgotten about it entirely if it hadn't happened again in February. Same scenario. Wednesday night. Inbound consist. Matched. I walked the train. Verified the count. Radioed Denise. Went for coffee. Came back. One extra car. This time, it was BNSF 7612003, a covered hopper. Sitting on track 14. Last car in the cut. Not on the consist. No waybill. No AEI record of arrival. "Joe," Denise said on the radio, "is this going to be a regular thing with you?" "I don't know, Denise. You want to come out here and count them yourself?" She didn't. She flagged it. Rick Anglin wrote it up. The car sat on track 22 for 10 days, and then vanished. By March, I'd logged 3 more. All different reporting marks. All box cars or covered hoppers closed cars. The kind you can't see into from the outside. All appearing after I'd already walked and verified the inbound. All vanishing within 1 to 3 weeks without any record of departure. 5 phantom cars in 3 months. I brought it up at the shift meeting. Rick Anglin looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "System glitch." He said it the way you'd say, "weather," to explain why your knee hurts. A thing that happens. Beneath investigation. I might have agreed with him, except for Dale. Dale Prentice was our night shift switchman. 44 years old, ex-Army, built like a fire hydrant. He'd been at Ellerby for about 2 years, which made him relatively new. Before that, he'd worked for CSX out of a yard in Willard, about 90 miles east. And before that, he'd been a conductor on road freight. He knew railroads the way I knew this yard deep in his body, in the soles of his feet. Dale was the first person besides me to take the phantom cars seriously. In fact, he took them more seriously than I did. "You're keeping a list, right?" he asked me one night in March, leaning against the shanty wall with his thermos. Dale always had a thermos. Never coffee. Some kind of herbal tea that smelled like a health food store. I've been writing them up. Rick doesn't care. Rick doesn't care about anything that isn't on a switch list. That's not the same as it not mattering. "So what do you think it is?" Dale looked out at the yard. The sodium lights made everything amber and shadowless, except for the gaps between the cars, which were pure black. "I think someone is using this yard as a mailbox," he said. "Drop a car, leave it. Someone else picks it up. No paperwork because it's not supposed to be in the system. For what? For whatever's inside them." I thought about that. Cargo theft on the railroad is a real thing, $100 million a year problem, if you believe the AAR's numbers. But it usually works the other direction. People break into cars and steal what's already there. They don't add cars to a yard and then take them away. That's backwards, I said. "Yeah," Dale said. "That's why nobody's looking at it." Over the next few weeks, Dale became the person I talked to about the phantom cars. Not because I was obsessed, I wasn't. I had a 12-year-old daughter, Macy, and a mother in Kenton with a bad hip and a car payment that didn't care about mysterious boxcars. But Dale had a way of bringing it up that made you feel like you were part of something. Like the two of you were the only people sharp enough to see what was happening. It was flattering, I'll admit. Night shift is lonely. The hours between 2 and 5 a.m. have a gravity that pulls you toward anyone willing to talk. Dale started keeping his own records. He'd photograph the phantom cars with his phone, noting the exact time, the exact track, the exact position, in the cut. He mapped the yard in a little spiral notebook, drawing where each one appeared. He checked the AEI reader logs himself, pulling the data off the office computer during Denise's bathroom breaks. It's always the same pattern, he told me in April, spreading his notebook on the shanty table. They appear on the tracks closest to the west ladder. That's the approach from the Toledo sub. They're always coupled onto cuts that came in from Toledo, and they're always closed cars. Okay, so someone is setting them off on the approach before the AEI reader and coupling them onto the inbound after it passes the scanner. The reader counts 47. By the time you walk the train, there's 48. The extra car never gets scanned in because it was never on the train when the train passed the reader. This was, I had to admit, a clean theory. The AEI reader at Ellerby's Gate was a single-point installation on the main approach from the west. If someone set off a car on the siding just before the reader, waited for the inbound to pass, and then coupled the extra car on after the fact, you'd get exactly what I'd been seeing. A car that appeared to materialize. Who, though? I asked. Who's doing the coupling? You'd need to be out on the approach in the dark. You'd need to know the schedule. Dale looked at me. Someone who works here, he said. That was the moment where, in a different kind of story, I would have become the investigator. I would have started creeping around the west approach at night with a camera. I would have staked out the siding. I would have gone deeper and deeper until I was in over my head. But I have a daughter, and a mother, and a car payment. And, honestly, a fundamental lack of interest in being the person who discovers something terrible. I've never been that person. Some people have a hunger for the hidden Dale, clearly did. And some people have a hunger for things staying where they're supposed to be. I'm the second kind. That's why I'm a car checker. I don't go looking for discrepancies. I just notice them when they interrupt the pattern. So I told Dale to report it. Report it to who? He said. Railroad police, the FRA, whoever handles this. With what evidence? A list of cars that aren't in the system anymore, that disappeared without a trace? They'll think we're making it up. Or they'll think we're the ones doing it. Then report it to Rick. Rick thinks it's a system glitch. Then it's Rick's problem, not ours. Dale went quiet for a while after that conversation. Not angry quiet, thinking quiet. The kind of quiet that, in a certain type of man, means a decision is being made that you won't hear about until it's already done. What happened next is something I didn't witness directly. I'm reconstructing it from what Dale told me later, from what I saw with my own eyes, and from what I eventually figured out. Some of this I'm certain about, some of it I'm inferring. I'll tell you which is which. In the second week of April, Dale started volunteering for extra duties. He offered to walk the west approach himself after each inbound, checking for any cars that might have been left on the siding. Rick Anglin, who was always happy to have someone else do work he didn't want to think about, approved it without question. So now Dale was out on the approach, alone, 2 or 3 nights a week, with a radio and a flashlight, and no supervision. I should have seen it. I should have seen it because I'm good at patterns, and the pattern was right there. Dale had identified a gap in the yard's tracking system, explained it to me clearly enough that I believed it, and then positioned himself inside that gap. He hadn't solved the mystery. He'd installed himself in its machinery, but I didn't see it, because I trusted him, because he was my friend, or the closest thing I had to one on the graveyard shift. What I did notice was that the phantom cars stopped appearing. For the entire month of April, Every inbound I checked matched its consist. Every count was right. No extra cars, no discrepancies. The pattern broke. "See?" Rick Anglin said. "System glitch. Resolved itself." Dale, when I mentioned it to him, just shrugged. Maybe they figured out someone was watching. In early May, a man I'd never seen before came into the yard office at 3 a.m. This alone was unusual. Ellerby doesn't get visitors. We're not on the way to anywhere. The office is a cinder block building with a counter, 2 desks, a bathroom that hasn't been renovated since the Ford administration, and a coffee machine that's legally a biohazard. Nobody comes here who doesn't have to. The man was tall, maybe 50, wearing a Carhartt jacket and work boots that were too clean. He asked for Dale, by name. Denise told him Dale was on the approach. The man nodded like he already knew this, and walked out the back door toward the west end of the yard. "Who was that?" I asked Denise. "No idea. He didn't sign the visitor log." I watched him cross-track 4 inches the sodium light, stepping over the rails with the ease of someone who'd done it before, and disappear into the dark toward the approach. I should have followed him. I should have at least radioed Dale to tell him someone was coming. But Denise had a stack of switch lists that needed reconciliation, and we'd just gotten word of a light engine movement on the main that needed flagging, and by the time I thought about it again, 40 minutes had passed. When Dale came back at the end of his shift, I told him about the visitor. "Yeah," he said. "I know. Who is he?" "Guy I used to work with at Willard. He's brokering some storage deals. Short lines with extra capacity can rent out idle tracks, keep cars for shippers who need overflow space. It's legit. And a 4 meet at 3 a.m.? His schedule's weird, like ours." Dale smiled when he said it, and I remember thinking it was the first time his smile had ever made me uneasy. Now, I need to tell you about Macy, because Macy is the reason everything happened the way it did. My daughter is 12, sharp as a tack, and almost pathologically curious. She's the kind of kid who takes things apart to see how they work, and then, about 60% of the time, puts them back together. The other 40%, I end up with a kitchen drawer full of disassembled smoke detectors and clock radios. Macy has always been fascinated by the yard. When she was small, I used to bring her to the parking lot at shift change and let her watch the goats shove cars around. She'd name them. She called the GP38 Big Gerald and the SW1500 Little Pete. She knew the difference between a boxcar and a covered hopper before she knew her multiplication tables. I tell you this because one night in mid-May, Macy did something I hadn't asked her to do. I'd left my notebook on the kitchen table, the one where I'd kept my own records of the phantom cars back in January and February. I'd stopped updating it when Dale took over the investigation, but it still had all my original notes, dates, reporting marks, track numbers, timestamps. Macy, being Macy, read it. And then, being Macy, she did what I would never have done. She looked up the reporting marks. There are websites, railcar tracking sites, hobbyist databases, industry tools, where you can enter a reporting mark and find out where a car has been, who owns it, what it's registered to carry. The information isn't always complete, and some of it requires paid access. But a 12-year-old with her mother's notebook and a school Chromebook can get surprisingly far. When I woke up the next afternoon, Macy was sitting at the kitchen table with a look on her face that I recognized from the time she'd taken apart the toaster and found a dead mouse inside. "Mom," she said, "those cars you wrote about, 2 of them don't exist." "What do you mean?" ABOX 52114 and GATX 89902. They're not in any database. The numbers don't match anything. It's like someone made them up. They could be deregistered. Old cars get scrapped. Their marks get retired. I thought about that. But ABOX numbers go up to 52000 something, and those are all accounted for. 52114 isn't a gap. It's a car that someone is using a number for that belongs to a car that's currently sitting in a yard in Memphis. I stared at my daughter. "How do you know it's in Memphis?" ShipperConnect.com. You can track pool cars. A-Box 52114 has been in Memphis since November. It never came to Ohio. I sat down. So the car I saw in January, the one I read the reporting mark off of, with my own eyes, with my own flashlight, had a fake mark? Someone painted a number on it that belonged to a different car? Macy nodded. The other three check out, she said. Real cars, real routes. They were actually in the area at the right times. But those two, someone faked them, Mom. Someone put fake numbers on real cars so they couldn't be traced. I want to be clear about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't what you might expect. I wasn't excited. I wasn't afraid. I was angry. I was angry because I trusted Dale Prentice. I trusted his curiosity, his intelligence, his little spiral notebook. I trusted that he was trying to figure out the same thing I was. And now I was sitting in my kitchen watching my 12-year-old do in one afternoon what Dale, with his full access to the yard systems and his extra shifts on the approach, had apparently never bothered to do. Unless he had. Unless he already knew. The phantom cars had stopped appearing in April, right after Dale started patrolling the approach himself. He told me it was because they figured out someone was watching. But there was another explanation. The cars stopped appearing because Dale was the one making them appear. And once he controlled the approach, he didn't need to be sloppy about it anymore. What if Dale hadn't been investigating the phantom cars? What if he'd been running them? I didn't confront him. Something told me not to some instinct, older and smarter than curiosity. Instead, I did something I'd never done in 6 years at Ellerby. I changed my routine. The next Wednesday night, after I'd walked the inbound and radioed the count to Denise, I didn't go to the shanty for coffee. I went to the west end of the yard, past Track 27, past the old maintenance shed, to the edge of the approach where the main line curves in from the Toledo subdivision. I stood in the dark between two tank cars on the storage tracks, and I waited. At 2:47 a.m., I heard a locomotive, not the inbound that had already arrived and was being sorted. This was a light engine movement, just a single unit, running slowly on the approach with its headlamp dimmed. That's unusual. Road engines on the main run with full lighting. Only yard movements dimmed down. The locomotive stopped. I heard air brakes exhale. Then, after a pause, the squeal of a coupler engaging. Someone was coupling a car. I couldn't see well from where I was standing. The curve of the approach and the bulk of the tank cars blocked my line of sight, but I could hear it clearly. The locomotive pulled forward. The slack ran out, and then it shoved back, pushing something onto the siding. A single car. Then the locomotive uncoupled and pulled away west, back toward the main line. The whole maneuver took less than 4 minutes. I waited another 10 minutes. Then I heard footsteps on the ballast. Boots. Careful. Steady. Familiar. Dale walked past me in the dark, maybe 15 feet away. He had a flashlight, but it was off. He was carrying something, a cordless impact wrench, the kind mechanics use, and what looked like a metal plate. He walked toward the siding where the car had been left. I heard him working on something, metal on metal, a whirring sound, the impact wrench, then silence, then his footsteps again, heading back toward the yard. I stayed where I was for another 20 minutes, until I was sure he was gone. Then I walked to the siding. There was a single boxcar sitting on the track. In the dark, with my flashlight, I read the reporting mark, TTGX 991455, and on the ground next to the rail, I found a rectangle of adhesive residue where something had recently been peeled off the car's side frame, right where the AEI tag would be. Dale was swapping the tags. He was pulling the real AEI transponder off the phantom car and replacing it with one that matched whatever fake reporting mark he'd painted on the side. That way, if anyone ran a handheld reader on the car, the tag and the mark would agree. A perfect ghost. A car that, according to every system designed to track it, simply didn't exist. I should have called the railroad police that night. I know that. But I want you to understand why I didn't, because the reason matters. Dale Prentice was not a bad man. I want to say that even now, even after everything, he was a man who was losing his house because his ex-wife's medical debt from before the divorce had followed him through some quirk of Ohio law that I still don't fully understand. He was a man who had a son in Mansfield he hadn't seen in 3 years because he couldn't afford the legal fees to fight the custody arrangement. He was a man who drank herbal tea instead of coffee because his stomach lining was wrecked from years of ibuprofen for a shoulder he'd hurt in Mosul, and the VA had put him on an 18-month wait list for surgery. I knew all of this because night shift is long, and Dale talked to me. Not the way he talked about the phantom cars. Careful, strategic, leading. The way a person talks at 4 a.m. when they're tired, and the darkness makes honesty feel safe. So when I found out he was running some kind of freight scheme, my first thought wasn't, I need to stop this. It was, how bad is it, actually? Cargo theft costs the railroads $100 million a year. The railroads make $50 billion. Dale Prentice skimming some goods off a short line yard in nowhere. Ohio, was that the crime of the century? Or was it a desperate man doing a desperate thing in a world that had used him up and put him on a wait list? That calculus is the reason I didn't call anyone for another 2 weeks. That calculus is the reason 2 people almost died. The last Wednesday in May was warm. Unseasonably warm. That heavy Ohio warmth that comes with a sky the color of a bruise and air you can feel on your skin like a hand. I was walking the inbound 43 cars, a short one, and I was almost done when I heard it. Knocking. Not mechanical knocking. Not the sound a brake shoe makes when it's dragging, or the sound of a loose grab iron banging against a car body. This was rhythmic, deliberate, coming from inside a car. It was a boxcar near the end of the cut. CSXT 140877. A real car, on the consist, way build for the co-op in Richland, carrying 50,000-pound bags of potash. I put my ear to the steel wall and listened. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was inside that car. Someone alive. I radioed Dale. Dale, I've got knocking inside CSXT 140877 on track 8. Sounds human. Silence. Dale, copy? Copy, Joe. I'm coming. He was there in 3 minutes. I watched his face in the flashlight beam as he listened to the knocking. Something happened to it that I hadn't seen before. Not surprise, something worse. Recognition. We need to open it, I said. Joe, we need to open this car right now, Dale. That's a sealed car. We don't have authority to break a seal. There is a person inside this car. Dale's jaw worked. He looked at me, and in that look I saw him calculate something, and I saw the calculation fail. That's not the car you think it is, he said quietly. What? It's not really one. 40877. The potash is on a different car. I swapped the marks and the tags 3 days ago. That car, the one with the knocking it came in on Mondays, consists as a phantom. It was supposed to be picked up tonight. Picked up by who? Picked up with what inside it? I don't know. You don't know? I don't open them, Joe. That's not I don't know what's in them. I just move them. I swap the tags. I park them on the right track, and someone else handles the rest. I don't know what's in them. I looked at Dale Prentice, his wrecked shoulder, his herbal tea, his little notebook, his desperate, intelligent, ruined life. And I understood all of it at once. He wasn't a mastermind. He was a mailbox, exactly the way he described it to me months ago, except he wasn't describing someone else's operation. He was describing his own role in it. Move the cars, swap the identity, park them in the right place. Don't look. Don't ask. Collect the envelope from the man in the Carhartt jacket. We are opening this car, I said, right now, and then you are going to tell me everything, and I am going to decide what happens. Not you, me. I don't know where that voice came from. Some well deeper than my job or my fear. Maybe it came from being a mother. Maybe it came from being a woman who has spent her whole life being the one who notices the pattern but lets someone else decide what it means, and being done with that. Dale broke the seal. Inside the boxcar, in the dark, on a bed of flattened cardboard and moving blankets, were two people. A man and a woman, both young, mid-20s maybe. The man had a bruise on his face that was days old, yellow-green at the edges. The woman was holding a plastic water bottle that was empty. They were both wearing clothes that had been slept in for too long. The car smelled like urine and fear and the stale metal of an enclosed space. They flinched when the door opened. The woman raised her hand against the flashlight beam. The man said something in a language I didn't recognize later. I learned it was Tigrinya, and then, in English, he said, "Please, water." Dale made a sound behind me, a small broken sound, like something cracking inside a wall. "You didn't know," I said, not a question. "I didn't know." His voice was raw. "Joe, I swear to God, I didn't know. They told me it was cargo, electronics, pharmaceuticals, stuff that fell off the manifest. I didn't." "Stop talking." I climbed into the car. I gave the woman my water bottle from my belt. I gave the man the granola bar from my jacket pocket. I told them, slowly, that they were safe, that we were going to help them, that no one was going to put them back inside this car. The woman looked at me and said, in clear, accented English, "There were others, before us, in other cars." I need to tell you what I did next, because this is the part where the story changes direction and doesn't change back. I didn't call the railroad police. I didn't call the local sheriff, who was Rick Anglin's brother-in-law and had twice been investigated by the state for things I won't go into here. I didn't call the FRA tip line or the FBI cargo theft hotline or any of the numbers printed on the posters in the yard office that nobody ever reads. I called Terry Okafor. Terry is a long-haul trucker who lives in Kenton, 3 houses down from my mother. She's Nigerian-American, 58 years old, built like a middle linebacker, and she runs an informal network of people in Allen and Hardin counties who help undocumented and trafficked individuals get to safe houses in Columbus and Toledo, where there are legal aid organizations that know what they're doing. I know about Terry because my mother knows about Terry, because my mother volunteers at the Lutheran Church in Kenton that serves as one of Terry's waypoints. I called Terry at 3:30 a.m. from the parking lot of Ellerby Yard, with 2 people sitting in my back seat wrapped in blankets from the shanty. "How quick can you get to the Shell station on 30? I said. 25 minutes. "How many?" 2. They've been in a boxcar. I don't know how long. They need water and food and probably a doctor. "I'm moving." I hung up and looked at Dale, who was standing next to my car like a man who has just realized that the ground he's been walking on is not ground. "Dale." "Yeah." "The man in the Carhartt jacket. Who is he?" "His name is Vic Sorrento. He works out of Willard. He brokers, I thought he brokered surplus freight, pharmaceuticals, consumer goods, stuff that moves off book. He pays cash. He told me all I had to do was move the cars and keep them off the system." "How much?" $2,000 a car." "How many cars?" 9. "Since January." I did the math. $18,000. The cost of Dale's house. The cost of a lawyer who could get him back in a room with his son. The cost of a shoulder surgery the VA wouldn't schedule. "And you never opened a single one." He told me not to. He said the contents were insured, and the less I knew, the cleaner I was if it went south. "Did you believe that?" Dale was quiet for a long time. "I believed it because I needed to," he said. I drove the man and the woman to the Shell station. Terry was already there in her Silverado with the camper top, engine running. She looked at the 2 of them, looked at me, and nodded once. "Names?" she said. I didn't ask. "Good. Go home. I'll handle this." But before I pulled away, the woman who was already climbing into Terry's truck stopped and turned back to me. She said something I've thought about every day since. The car we were in was not the first one. The man who put us inside, not the one at this yard. A different man. In Indiana, he said there had been 12 loads this winter. He called us loads. 12. Dale said 9. That meant at least 3 cars had come through Ellerby, or through another yard like it, with people inside, before Dale was even recruited. The next part happened fast. I went home. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down everything. Every date, every reporting mark, every conversation with Dale, the name Vic Sorrento, everything. I put it in an envelope and drove it to the Allen County FBI field office in Lima, which opened at 8 a.m. I gave it to a woman at the front desk whose name I don't remember and said, "This is about human trafficking on a freight railroad. I have 2 witnesses who are currently being taken to safety. I'm the night shift car checker at Ellerby Yard, and I can walk your agents through every piece of physical evidence." The woman looked at me the way people look at you when you say something that rearranges their morning. "Take a seat," she said. I took a seat, and then I talked for 4 hours. What I know about what happened next comes from court records, from a news article in the Lima News that ran in August, and from one conversation with a federal agent who probably wasn't supposed to be as candid with me as she was. Vic Sorrento was arrested in Willard, Ohio, 6 days after I walked into the FBI office. He was charged with conspiracy to commit forced labor, transportation of persons for illegal purposes, and 14 counts of reckless endangerment. The investigation linked him to a network that had been using short-line rail yards across Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan as transfer points for people being trafficked from East Africa through Canada and into the United States. The freight rail system, with its 10,000 interchangeable cars and its chronically understaffed yards and its AEI tags that can be swapped with an impact wrench, was ideal. The cars were invisible. The people inside them were invisible squared. Dale Prentice was arrested the same day. He was charged with conspiracy to commit cargo theft and obstruction, which were later amended to include conspiracy to harbor undocumented persons. His lawyer argued that Dale didn't know the cars contained people. The prosecution argued that he didn't want to know, which in the eyes of the law is not quite the same as innocence. Dale pled guilty to a reduced set of charges. He got 22 months in a federal facility in Elkton. I was not charged with anything, though for a very uncomfortable period in June, I was told I might be. The fact that I'd moved the 2 witnesses before contacting law enforcement was, technically, a problem. The fact that I'd known about the phantom cars for months without reporting them was, technically, a bigger problem. The agent I spoke with, the candid one, told me that the U.S. attorney decided that charging the person who'd blown the operation open would be, in her words, a bad look. I'll take it. Rick Anglin retired the week after the arrests. He wasn't charged with anything either, but I think the revelation that a trafficking operation had been running through his yard, while he called it a system glitch, was more than his pride could absorb. I don't blame him. I don't blame Denise. I don't even entirely blame Dale, though I know I'm supposed to. Here's what I keep thinking about. Dale told me, back in March, that someone was using the yard as a mailbox. He was right. He was describing the operation perfectly. He was describing it because he was part of it. And the best lies are the ones built out of truth. Every insight he offered me was real. The gap in the AEI coverage, the timing with the inbound, the closed cars, the west approach. He handed me the whole picture, piece by piece, and the picture was accurate. What he left out was himself. And I keep thinking, would I have found the knocking? If Dale hadn't made me pay attention to the phantom cars in the first place, his phantom cars, his operation, would I have been listening closely enough to hear 2 people knocking on the inside of a boxcar at 2 a.m. on a warm Wednesday in May? I don't know. I think the answer might be no, which means the man who was running the scheme is also the man whose scheme taught me to hear the thing that cracked it open. That's not irony. I don't know what it is. I don't have a word for the shape of it. Macy asks me about it sometimes. She's 13 now, and she understands more of it than I'm comfortable with. "Mom," she said last week, "do you think Dale knew? Like, deep down?" I think he chose not to look. Is that different from not knowing? Yeah, baby. It's different. Not knowing is free. Choosing not to look costs you something every time. She thought about that. You looked, she said. I listened. It's not the same thing as looking. I didn't go hunting for it. I was just doing my job, and the knocking interrupted the pattern. Same thing. It's not. It is, Mom. The pattern is the looking. You can't hear something break a pattern if you're not already paying attention to the pattern. I didn't have an answer for that. My daughter is smarter than I am. That's not a failure. That's the whole point. I still work nights at Ellerby Yard. The railroad sent a team from the regional office to install a second AEI reader on the west approach and a camera system on the storage tracks. The crew is mostly new switchman, new day shift yard master, new procedures for sealed cars. The yard feels different. Not worse, not better, just different. The way a house feels after you've had the locks changed. I walk the tracks with my flashlight and my clipboard. I count the cars and check the marks, and listen to the sounds a train makes when it's sitting still. Most nights, the count is right. The pattern holds. The yard is a small, quiet, well-run place where fertilizer and lumber and corn syrup move from one place to another in the ordinary dark. But sometimes, and I want to be honest about this, because honesty is the only thing I have that I'm sure of, sometimes I stop next to a closed car, and I put my hand flat against the steel wall. Not my ear, my hand. I feel for the vibration that would mean someone inside is knocking. I never feel it. I never stop checking. One more thing. I debated whether to include this, because it might sound like the kind of ending that tries too hard to mean something. But it happened, so I'm telling you. About 3 months after the arrests, I got a letter. No return address. Postmarked Columbus. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note in careful, deliberate English. The woman from the car says thank you for the water. She has a name now that is safe to use. She is working. She is okay. She wanted you to know. Below that, in different handwriting, Terry's handwriting, which I recognized because she writes my mother's birthday cards every year, was a single line. She's in my bowling league. Her name is Selah. She's a terrible bowler and a good person. I put the letter in the drawer where I keep Macy's school photos and my father's watch and the other things I don't want to lose. Then I went to work.